If you've caught this broadcast, you are listening to the live unedited broadcast of episode 116 of LeaderCast. So, are we ready to get started, Tim?
I'm ready.
All right. You're listening to LeaderCast, episode 116.
Being a leader means navigating the storms of life. So, helping to multiply disciples isn't without storms. And guess what? We're in the middle of a storm right now. We read in Matthew's Gospel, this comes from Matthew, the 8th chapter, beginning at the 23rd verse. Then he got into the boat, and his disciples followed. Suddenly, a furious storm came up on the lake, so that the waves swept over the boat. But Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him, saying, "Lord, save us. We're going to drown." And Jesus replied, "You of little faith, why are you so afraid?" Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the waves and was completely calm.
So, before we jump into that text and our topic for today, leading through storms and permission slips, if you haven't already done so, I want to invite you to go ahead and hit the subscribe button where you're listening to this episode. You never know when we might drop another bonus episode of LeaderCast. And also, as a reminder, you can find show notes for this episode at transformingmission.org/116.
Okay, Sarah, I know that you helped lead a retreat for a church earlier this year that involved this scripture and Dare to Lead. Can you make the connection for me and for our listeners?
Sure. So, think about the storms in your own life and that you may have experienced as a leader. Think about the way that we gather information, whether it be from media reports and you see a report about your community, and you ask the question, okay, what's the truth here? What's really going on? Um, what's our response going to be in the midst of this storm? Something has happened. You didn't create it, but now you have to respond. That might be one scenario. Another scenario might be your spouse is diagnosed with cancer, or one of your kids falls and they break a bone. And now you're trying to help them take a shower and get ready and do homework with a broken hand. Or another storm might be simply moving or moving out of the home that you raised your kids in, and you've got a couple of decades of belongings and memories that you're trying to pack up. And you might say, well, yeah, but that's a good thing, but it's still a storm. Or another one might be one of your dear friends is getting a divorce, and you're friends with both of the people in the couple, and they've been together for over 2 decades, and there's a storm. But there's a more obvious storm that's happening in our world right now.
So the World Health Organization declares a pandemic, and the government declares a stay-at-home order. It's not safe to gather in public places. And in relationship to that, you're now navigating homeschooling, online church, snail mail church, phone church, while your spouse works from home, and you're all trying to remain kind and loving to one another. If you're listening to this after the pandemic, you might experience storms as your adult child is depressed and dealing with mental illness. There are still things that are present in people's lives, even with a pandemic, and they'll be there after the pandemic. Maybe maybe right in the middle of this, you took the risk to begin a whole new career, and your lifestyle has changed as a result, and you've had to cut out a lot. You've had to figure out what you're keeping and what you have to give up.
So we could go on and on with storms. Let me offer a couple more that might be happening, because why I'm wanting to name these is I want to invite you to name the storm in your life right now. There's one common experience that we're all having. If you're listening to this as we publish this episode in April of 2020, and that's the COVID 19 pandemic. But as Tim has just said, those storms are going to continue. We hope that they're seasons, and that they don't continue for long periods of time. But life happens, and how we respond to them, and is what we're going to talk about today. So here's another example. Um, your adult children and their spouse might be going through some marital trouble, or finances are getting tight, or a good thing that can happen, and it's still a storm. Somebody gets a promotion, but now work hours have changed and the whole rhythm of your life is shifting. Or sometimes just family dynamics. Somebody gets left out of big events in the family or decisions around aging parents. And yeah, you're left wondering what is going on here. Those are all storms.
Another storm, Sarah, may be, and since I'm old, I can use this one. But we get a little older, and we don't feel like we have anything to offer. And the storm then comes as silence and quietness in life when you don't feel like that. Although you do feel like you're productive, there's something that you don't feel like people want. Um, and one of them I know that we've heard is that is a child that's born weeks early while you're stationed overseas. You're not close to family. Um, all these storms necessitate some kind of courage to navigate. All of them are something in which we um, have to have to be able to step out with some kind of courage. So let's say one of those storms hits your life. How can you best lead others? That's the question.
So are you asking me that question?
I think I'm asking everyone, but I want you to lead us through the a way to answer it.
So the first thing that I would say, and part of why we wanted to walk through each one of those scenarios, is every storm is going to be different. What they all have in common is they all require courage. And where there are people, whether you're in a church setting, in a business setting, in your home, where there are people, there's going to be stuff from life that that's my word for a storm. There's going to be things from life that cause storms that people are going to bring with them. And right now, we're experiencing a storm together, the COVID 19 pandemic. But what I want to point out here is while we're experiencing a storm together, we're all experiencing that storm in a different way. So the experience is similar, but how we engage, how we process, how we feel it is different. So whether it's a collective storm or a personal storm, whether you're leading yourself or leading others through it, today we want to give you one simple tool, and it's called a permission slip. You may have written permission slips for your kids or remember your parents writing them for you when you were a kid. This is similar. And I I'm used to doing this with groups that we meet in person, but that's not the world that we're living in right now. I've also said to folks this question in this season that we're living in, just as something to do each day to help ground yourself and center yourself. And it's a way to both acknowledge the storm and be present to what is happening in your life, both at the very same time. Um, And for the record, this is a great question in the storms, but it's also a great question when it's calm. It's a universal question for any season in your life. We're talking about it in the context of storms because of what's happening in our world right now.
And you can ask yourself the question and record it in your journal. You can do it in person when, well, you can do it with a person, you can do it on the phone, you can do it in a Zoom meeting. It's always a way in which you're asking the question to set for yourself. So, Sarah, what's the question?
So, this is the question. What do you need to give yourself permission to do, to feel, and or experience today? Let me say that question again. What do you need to give yourself permission to do, feel, and or experience today? And I'd invite you to write it down in a journal or make a note on your notes app on your phone as some way to record what you need to give yourself permission to do. A permission slip when you were a kid or written for your kids wasn't any good unless there was a signature on it. Now, that might happen electronically now, but still, you had to fill something out. You had to write it down. And writing it down or talking about it makes it more real. As a leader, asking this question with a group of people is going to help you check in with people and to hear what they need. So listen closely, but don't make assumptions about how folks answer that question. So Tim and I were doing a Facebook Live a bit earlier today, and before we got on, I said to him, I'm just feeling tired today. Now, if he could, he might have wanted to reach through the internet and hand me a can of Diet Coke, but he saw that I already had a can of Diet Coke there. I didn't need anything. He didn't do that, and he didn't even say that. I didn't need anything from Tim. I just needed to say, I'm feeling tired. It was just the reality of how I was feeling. And so I offer that example to say it's easy for us as leaders to think that then we need to do something in the midst of that, but sometimes it's simply an acknowledgement of this is where I'm at today. So if I'm not as peppy as I used to be, or if I'm not as engaged, it's just because I'm feeling tired today. That's all that it is. So I just needed to give myself permission today to feel tired. So for you as an individual, it helps you name what you need. And that's where you take it the step farther. So you're helping a leader to understand what you need and also naming what you need. And both of those things are key to this. You need to set the tone here. You don't need the backstory. You don't need, Tim didn't interrogate me and say, Sarah, what time were you up until last night? What time did you get up this morning? Did you sleep well last night? He didn't need the backstory. I just needed a name. Here's what I'm feeling. This is what I need. Just bring some energy because I don't have it.
So a permission slip, Sarah, the way you're talking about it actually helps us stay in the moment. It's not something that allows us to check out because we've already given ourselves permission to respond, to step away if we need to, but we've done that so that we're in the moment and not just reactionary.
Yeah, I would say it's the opposite of checking out. It's really a way to check in with one another. Right. So that assumptions are not made and you can recognize what is needed. Now, this is not your personality, Tim, but I know other people, if I said, I'm feeling tired, they would be doing silly things all day to try and keep me awake and keep me focused and keep me smiling because that's who they are. And that's what they offer. So being aware of what you can do and what is helpful and asking the questions where questions need to be asked. I have asked this question in groups and we haven't shared it with anyone. I've just said write it down because it's about self-permission. It's about giving yourself permission to do something what do you need to do, feel, or experience in that, in whatever it is that's happening. So it might be on one of those Zoom meetings that you start the Zoom meeting by very quickly saying to the 6, 8 people that you're with, what do you need to give yourself permission to do, feel, or experience in our time together? And it's a quick check in. It doesn't take more than 3 minutes because people aren't providing a whole backstory. They're just naming what it is. So today we want to invite you to consider responding to that question. What do you need to give yourself permission to do, feel, and or experience today? You consider responding to that question and then invite the people that you are in contact with to respond to that question as well. So, as an example of what you might give yourself permission to do, Tim, do you want to share some things that you've needed to give yourself permission to do, feel, or experience?
Let me give you two. One of them comes in regard to meetings, and whether it's been in-person meetings or Zoom meetings. I have to confess that I used not to say very much until the very end, because I felt like that really what I had to say wasn't very important, and then I'd just say what I wanted to say at the end. I've given myself permission now to speak sooner in a meeting.
Okay.
That maybe what I have to say has a little more weight to it than I've been saying. So that's one of the things in meetings. In this time in which we're living now, I've had to give some things up that were very important to me. So I've had to stop doing some things, and I've given myself permission to feel okay about that. Even though I can't do them, I was still feeling like I wanted to. I felt guilty. And I think maybe I would have articulated it the way some people are saying is, I don't care, I'll just do it anyway. So I've had to give myself permission to give up some of those things. That's in a different way in which we're talking about it today. But those are two things I'd say immediately that come to mind. That makes sense?
Yeah, it makes sense to me.
Because I've met with people face to face over for 46 years of ministry, creating ways in which I could meet with people. I've had to give myself permission to say it's okay now that it's just with text or phone call or email, and I'm actually in contact with people more, but I'm more intentional now with using the electronic means of connecting with people. I have to confess, I had to give myself permission to be able to feel that it was not an intrusion to answer email. But now it may be the way to actually be connected to people.
Okay.
So that's just part of my list. Sarah, what kind of list do you have?
So for me, we're doing this from Ohio, and every day at 2:00 in our state, our governor and director of public health and lieutenant governor do a press conference. And so I've given myself permission to have a mid-afternoon interruption, and many days I'm watching the press conference to be informed so that I know what's happening. But also, I have found for me, and this is shifting a little bit right now, but the information that they are sharing helps me to maintain a calm presence. And that's what I want to be able to offer to the leaders that I lead, that I can be a calm presence in the midst of the storm. Giving myself permission to go for a walk and to not go for a walk. To make food that I haven't made in years, to go to bed when I'm tired, even if the clock I look at it and want to say to myself, "Are you 10 years old?" When I'm tired, go to bed. To feel bored. Some days I'm bored. I'm bored with either having to once again sit in front of a computer screen and not sit with people around a table. Early on, I had to give myself permission to be mad, because I was mad. There were things that were canceled. There were things that were now no longer present in people's lives that I loved. And I was just mad because I was grieving. I've had to give myself permission to be grateful and to count my blessings. Um, and to be sad that I haven't met two babies born in my family in late January and early February, because the plan was we'd be together for Easter, and guess what? That didn't happen. So I get to be grateful for FaceTime and pictures and Facebook and movies and all of the things that get sent my way, even though I'm not holding and cuddling them in person. That's a long list. Those don't all happen on one day. Those are things that over the course of the past month, when I have recognized what I am feeling and what's happening inside my soul, that I've simply hit the pause button and said, "Okay, Sarah, just give yourself permission to be mad. That's what today is. Okay, you're bored. So what are you going to do about it? Are you going to be bored, or are you going to find something that's going to keep you from being bored? Go take a walk." My mother in my head. Go outside and play. that's what that sounded like. So it may sound silly in terms of listening to other people talk about it, but what I have found from practicing this with groups that are intact and groups that might meet for one time is it really becomes a place of empowering yourself and empowering others. And it's a place of connection to be able to build relationships with others. So, with all of that said, Tim, what thoughts do you have?
Well, as you talk about relationships, that's really what's most important in the midst of this, is that giving yourself permission and then listening to the permission that people give themselves allows you to make some connection that you wouldn't make otherwise. And it moves beyond assumption. I mean, my great theory is we make up what we don't know. And so even with people sitting around the table or on a Zoom meeting, if we've not listened to where we can make those connections, we're still trying to make connections, but it's with assumption and not with reality. And so this is a way in which we can stay present and build relationships, which at this point in time, in the midst of what we're going through right now, is extremely important.
Yeah. Relationships. We're learning to do that in a whole new way. And so use this little tool of permission slips to help you lead through the storm that you're experiencing now. And if you're listening to this at a time after the pandemic, it still works. It works in the calm and it works in the storm. So our next episode, we're going to start a conversation about the skills that we need when leading through a storm. So as a reminder, you can find show notes for this episode at transformingmission.org/116. Now go lead a movement of Jesus followers. Bye for now.